Ladies and gentlemen, can you hear me? Welcome, everybody, and forgive me for standing between you and Claire Tomalin. Claire, we, as you can see, were trampled to death in the rush for tickets, and we thank you very much for being with us this evening. Before I introduce you more formally, let me just say a word about why we've organised this literary feast for our alumni. 80 years ago, the Newnham Arts Society invited Virginia Woolf to come and speak here and at Girton. As you'll know, Virginia had a memorable lunch at King's with Dadie Rylands. It was, I believe, poached sole, exquisite wines, and the best silver service. She also had dinner at Newnham. Meat, 2 veg, and a glass of water. It'll be better tonight for those who are staying. Her reflections, delivered thereafter, became a room of one's own, a key piece in the iconography of women's writing and in the general emancipation of women. Since Jane Austen's days and before, women have found an outlet for their talents through writing, which a century and a half ago were denied them in the business of the wider world. And perhaps women are also blessed with a particular sympathy, interest in other people, which lends itself to expression through writing. If any of you heard Catherine Whitehorn the other week, Catherine, talking to Matthew Paris on Great Lives about Mary Stott, the doyenne of women journalists, you'll know exactly what I mean. So it's not surprising that Newnham is not only groundbreaking as a place of excellence for the education of women, but is blessed amongst its alumni with some of the best women writers of this century and the last. Somehow, the college seems to have created a virtuous circle of education and authorship to our great delight and to the inspiration of our students. Some 50 of Newnham's authors have already been approached to give something to our archive, and most have given. Not their whole archive, for understandable reasons, but in each case a variety of manuscripts, personal memorabilia, photos, casting light on the interaction between their life and their work. And quite a few of you generous donors are here with us this evening. So this weekend is a celebration of your achievement. It's also the beginning of a larger undertaking. We have, we think, the foundation for something quite important in the history of writing. Newnham's tradition will grow and will be of wider interest. Many of you were here last term when Phyllis James, PD James, who is not an alumna but jolly well should have been, came to talk and gave us part of the corrected manuscript of her latest book. But moving to a next and broader stage, building a focus on women's writing, requires more than the spare time efforts of some senior members and of our excellent librarian and archivist. And as I think you may have seen, we are aiming to raise 30,000 in the first instance, only the first instance, to employ dedicated archival effort to build this archive, to pay for permanent displays around the college, and to run future occasions such as this. With your help, I know that this weekend, which is wonderful enough, will simply be the beginning. So thank you to our writers who have joined us this weekend. Thank you particularly to Sarah Dunant, to Nicola Beaumont, to Claire. Claire Tomalin read English at Newnham and then went down to combine marriage and motherhood with part-time editing work for Heinemann's. One of her most vivid memories of the mid-50s, she writes, is of crying into a wash basin full of soapy grey baby clothes. There were no washing machines in those days. While, quotes, my handsome and adored husband was off playing football in the park on Sunday morning with the delightful young men who'd been friends to both of us at Cambridge. Claire's life has had, later on, more than its share of tragedy. But Claire has come through this blossomed as literary editor of the New Statesman and Sunday Times, and then, over the last 20, 30 years, as a distinguished biographer. In particular, Claire has written of writers and of the worlds they inhabited: Mary Wollstonecraft, Jane Austen, Shelley, Nellie Ternan and Dickens, and of course most recently Pepys and then Thomas Hardy, making their worlds as vivid as you have made their lives and their writing, their characters, the insights that you have shared with us. Claire, thank you for tackling tonight the conundrum: biography, intrusion and curiosity.
It's a great honour to be here for this important occasion and this wonderful and thrilling plan that you have thought up at Newnham for setting up an archive. I mean, it couldn't speak, I couldn't feel more warmly than I do about it, because archives, of course, are what I've lived by. Some of the happiest moments of my life have been finding things in archives, leaping to my feet, suddenly remembering I'm in the Public Record Office and shouldn't shout for joy, but there something is that you wanted to find and that you found it. But I'm not going to talk about archives, I'm going to talk about things that come out of archives, biographies. And I chose as my title, which Patricia very kindly summarised, this rather long quotation, which struck a terrible pang into me when I came across it in the letters of Charles Dickens. I have a particular objection to that kind of interest in a great mind which prompts a visitor to take a good look at the mortal habiliments in which it is arranged, and afterwards to catalogue them like an auctioneer. I have no sympathy whatever with the staring curiosity that it gratifies. Dickens wrote this in 1855 when he was offered an article about Charlotte Bronte for his magazine Household Words, and he turned it down sharply. She had just died. Well, how does a biographer respond to such a stunning rebuke as that? Biographers are used to disapproval, even though Plutarch was writing excellent biographies in antiquity used by Shakespeare for his plays, even though the Old Testament is a tissue of biographies. But I want to read you some of the harsh words that have been said about biography, which all biographers have to take to heart and think about. This is a report of Tennyson's words. Tennyson was a friend of Charles Dickens. Dickens greatly admired Tennyson's poetry. Tennyson refused an invitation to go and stay with him in Switzerland because he didn't say because there were so many children, but because he said he might find himself having to reproach Dickens for his sentimentality. But still, they were good friends. And I think, although this is a report of Tennyson, you can hear Tennyson's voice very clearly. Desiring acquaintance with the lives of great men was treating them like pigs, to be ripped open for the public. He thanked God Almighty with his whole heart and soul that he knew nothing, and that the world knew nothing of Shakespeare but his writings, that he knew nothing of Jane Austen, and that there were no letters preserved, either of Shakespeare's or of Jane Austen's, that they had not been ripped open like pigs. Tennyson, as you know, arranged to have his own biography written by his docile son, who did not rip him open like a pig. George Eliot, another friend of Dickens, called biography the disease of English literature, although her partner, George Henry Lewis, wrote the first excellent biography of Goethe. Thomas Hardy, was so nervous of biographical intrusion that he wrote his own account of his life and told his wife to publish it as her work, which she did. Coming nearer to our own time, an admired American critic held forth like this: biography, Janet Malcolm is her name, biography is the medium through which the remaining secrets of the famous dead are taken from them and dumped out in full view of the world. She sees the biographer as a burglar, rifling through drawers, driven by voyeurism and busybodyism, seeking stolen goods. Biographer and reader, she writes, tiptoe down corridors to stand in front of the bedroom door and try to peep through the keyhole. Well, this is good knockabout stuff, but a more serious attack, and the one I find most interesting, comes from John Updike, late John Updike. The trouble with literary biographies is that they mainly testify to the long worldly corruption of life as documented deeds and days and disappointments pile up, and cannot convey the unearthly human innocence that attends in the perpetual present tense of living the self that seems the real one. Well, that is rather good, isn't it? That does make you think. It's an eloquent protest. Don't we all feel ourselves to be in the perpetual present tense of living and innocent? But biography is, after all, akin to history. It takes account of time passing. Biographies can't be written in the present tense. And Updike's objection, I think, is really to the arrogance of the biographer, the arrogance of anyone who seeks to sum up the artist whose genius is so far above the meagre talents of the biographer. Writers especially dislike the prospect of biography because they know the power of words. No one wants to be summed up. No one wants to have their motives and behaviour explained by a less intelligent person. All the same, Dickens' attack on staring curiosity and people being catalogued as by an auctioneer must be seen in context. 7 years before he wrote it, in 1848, he had already appointed his best friend John Forster to be his biographer, and revealed to Forster details of his life that he had kept from everyone else, whose value as a story he thoroughly understood as a novelist. I see it like this: every life is a story. Stories which are often more surprising, more curious than fiction. Dickens knew this very well, in spite of his remarks about Charlotte Bronte, and his friend Elizabeth Gaskell also knew it very well when she wrote her great biography of Charlotte Bronte. A story about a person, a story about a writer, and a story about what women writers had to contend with in their time. Forster, too, saw what a story Dickens's life was. Writing it was Forster's supreme achievement and great gift of friendship, and it was done when he was ill and approaching death himself. The revelations about Dickens's childhood aroused intense interest in the public, so the book showed, and so the first volume of the biography, which had that unknown material in it. Understandably, it is an extraordinary story. Volumes 2 and 3 were much more discreet. Forster could not tell everything he knew about Dickens. But, as with most biographies of the great, there were many sub-stories lurking there, stories of minor lives of Dickens' friends and associates. I'm just going to take a drink of water. This is roughly where I come in. This is what started me on a course of writing, not one book about Dickens, but I'm afraid 2, because I've just finishing writing another. It was the sense that there were these lurking things. As a child, I read with passion David Copperfield, Great Expectations, Bleak House. I even believed, because my initials were CD, Claire de Lavenay, that I had a magic kinship with Charles Dickens. Absurd, isn't it? Now I can bring Cambridge into this story. Up here, reading English, as Patricia said, in 1952, I was studying 19th century literature, and there was to be an essay on Dickens, of course, and Joan Bennett was my tutor at that point. Many of you will remember that at that point, Dr. Leavis diktat about Dickens, saying he was not one of the great English novelists at all, and his only worthwhile book was Hard Times, still prevailed. Dickens and Queen Leavis changed their minds and indeed wrote absolutely wonderfully about Dickens later. But when I was 18-year-old undergraduate, they hadn't changed their minds, and I had a moral struggle as I sat in the university library thinking, shall I say what I really think, or should I toe the line? Not that Joan Bennett or anyone at Newnham expected me to toe the line. So I won that little battle. I wrote my essay praising Dickens for what I thought was praiseworthy. And as I worked on Dickens, I read 2 thrilling books. Edmund Wilson's The Two Scrooges, and the American biographer Edgar Johnson's biography of Dickens.